this way. It's always so fun to have a group of like 50 people stare at you. But that's my job. My name is Bryn. I'm the events manager here, so I'm in charge of making things like this happen, which is a very cool job to have. I'm so excited to see you all here. I'm glad you braved the winter weather advisory to be here. It'll totally be worth it, I promise. So my job is just to give a few announcements up top, give you the lay of the land, and then introduce these two wonderful authors who we have here today. So, a couple of announcements. We do have a restroom. It is a staff restroom. It's available to you during events. But no, it's a staff restroom, so there's cleaning supplies. It's in the other room, and back behind a curtain that says staff only, and behind a door that says staff only. So don't be deterred by those two obstacles. If you need help finding it, we'll be more than happy to help you find it. Myself and the other, I was gonna say the only other person in a striped shirt, but there is one more striped shirt, so never mind. If it looks like we work here, we probably do. There's 4 of us today. Then a couple of other just housekeeping things. Our shipment of Claire's books did not come on time, so unfortunately we are sold out of those already. If you want to order Claire's book with us, we'd be more than happy to make that happen for you at the register. It should come pretty quickly. We just need your name and information, and we can get that done for you. We also got what I thought was plenty of books of Katie's, so that we may be low on those. I think we have about 15 left. So if we do end up selling out, which would be very exciting, we can also order those for you if you want to get them from your local independent woman-owned bookstore. Happy to facilitate that for you. Okay, the plan for today is that Katie and Claire are going to be in conversation up top. Then we will have a Q&A, so if you have any questions, hang on to those. They'll just be fielding questions from the audience, so speak up if there's anything that's not covered in their discussion. There is always a pause and a moment of awkwardness. Don't be afraid to ask questions. If you're waiting for a chair, there's 4 up front. There's at least 3 up front. I see one that's open here about in the middle, and I think we put out a couple of our emergency only chairs. So if you want to come sit down, there are a few more available. Be brave, don't be shy. Okay, so there are 2 more in the front if you want to take a seat. But if you want to stand, I'd rather stand than sit in the front row. I get it. I don't get it, but I'll allow it. Okay, so that's the plan. Book discussion, Q&A. Then last but certainly not least, we'll have a book signing where Katie will be signing her copies of Not in My Book. Very exciting. We're going to do that up here. I'll need a minute just to scooch the table forward and get Katie set up. So if you'll just form an orderly line as much as possible through the aisle and the chairs. That's how we'll do that. If you have not yet purchased your copy of Not in My Book and would like to do so, just head to the register first and then come get in line. Okay? Everybody clear on the plan for today? Awesome. Great. Well, without further ado, let me introduce our 2 authors. A Nashville native, Claire Gilmore studied supply chain management and English literature, a perfect combination, at the University of Tennessee. She is currently a resident of North Carolina, daylighting as a corporate analyst. Her second novel is Perfect Fit. Katie Holt is a New York City resident but a Tennessee native. She studied English with a concentration in creative writing at NYU and fought with every professor to prove that romance novels were worthy of their time. She's a Nora Ephron fanatic, Swiftie, and a warm chocolate chip enthusiast. Not in My Book is her first novel. Please welcome Katie and Claire.
Hello, everybody.
Hello. All right, our mics are on. We're ready. Okay. Thank you, everyone, so much for coming, and extra special. Whoa! All right, let's start over. Thank you so much to everyone for coming, and thank you to the amazing Union Avenue Bookstore for hosting us today. We are here to celebrate Miss Katie Holt and her debut romance, which came out less than a month ago on December 10th. So, to kick us off, can you give us the pitch for Not in My Book?
Yes, okay. So basically it's about these 2 people who are in a creative writing class, have to write novels, and they really hate each other, but they hate what the other writes more. And their professor has had enough of their childish antics and makes them co-write a romance novel together, but things tend to fly off the page for them.
Yes.
Yes.
That's a really good pitch. Is that something that you...
I've done it like 3 times right now, so I'm like, got it.
Yeah, I was going to say, it starts to really roll off the tongue.
Thank you. Yeah.
All right, so what inspired you to write this particular story? Where did the seed of the idea come from?
So I took a creative writing class for the very first time when I was in high school, and it was a workshop, and I had no idea what that meant. I thought it was going to be like a lecture, like you write down your story, you give it to the professor, they give you feedback. No, it's sick and it's twisted. They make you read it out loud, and they make you read it out loud for the first time in front of everybody, and then they make you critique it. So like everybody's listening to what you write, and they're like, that was really bad, that was really horrible, and you just have to do it. And I thought that was so demented, and it was so scary. And I was like, well, what if you had to do that with somebody that you actually thought was really hot in the class? Like, how much worse would that be? And then I'll just kind of move from there.
Yeah, I've been in that position too, in college, creative writing minor.
Horrific.
So, yeah, absolutely terrible.
It's like a form of torture, actually. Like, it's so terrible, like, what they make you do.
And being an author too is like, you get feedback all the time,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not usually to your face.
No, a lot of it's like behind like a profile, like a username, and you're like, yeah, whatever, but it's like somebody that you also have like a Spanish class with is being like, your dialogue is just not there. And you're like, oh, okay, thank you very much.
Yeah. Okay, awesome. So, this book takes place in New York City,
Yes.
which I know that you spent some time in.
Yes.
It is so atmospheric, whether you've read it or not. Please be prepared to want to get on a plane and go to New York immediately, especially just because of the timeline. It takes place like over the holiday season, and it's just like such a lovely atmospheric book. But because you have lived there, I'm sort of interested about the way that the setting informed the book and what is real experience of yours, and then what you kind of like fabricated or fictionalized for the story.
It's a lot of real places. So if you go on my Instagram, it's like a post I did where you can go to actual places in the book. But the first draft I wrote like was nowhere near accurate. I had no idea how New York City worked. It's a grid system, if you didn't know. I had no idea. And I was just kind of like writing like random coffee shops and making up names. But then when I finally moved there, I filled it in with like my favorite places. So like my favorite bookstore, my favorite pub to go to, and like my favorite, coffee shop. So a lot of it is real. I did not experience a lot of what happened in this book. Probably my parents are happy about that. But, but yeah, a lot of it is like fictionalized in real places.
Yeah, okay. And then as far as your experience as a student in New York, I know you jumped off by saying you experienced a high school critique.
Yeah.
But did that ever come up in college? Is it something that you studied?
Did it ever. Everyone in college was like way worse because they had like this literary chip on their shoulder where, like romance is just like not worthy of their time. Like every professor I ever had told me that, you can happily ever afters don't exist. And I thought that was bullshit. So I was like, well, I'm gonna write my happily ever after and you're gonna have to give me an F and I'm gonna have to fight you and I won't go down without a fight and it's gonna be a long turmoil thing. And I would just go back and forth with them because they were really, really bad about it. Especially like, no offense to the men in the room, but the dude bros that were like in my like literary fiction classes who like only read like James Joyce and all that stuff were kind of the exact same way where they just did not buy into romance or didn't understand the appeal.
Okay, this is really setting me up for the rest of my questions.
Oh, perfect, I love it.
So we're gonna circle back on that. But going into Aiden and Rosie as characters now. Okay, so these two, I don't think it's a spoiler to say that they're very antagonistic to each other right at the beginning of the book, but let's just like start with Rosie first.
Yes.
So her as a character, how did you develop her? What inspiration does she come from? Because she's the female main character.
Yeah.
She sort of like leads the book. So tell us a little bit about Rosie.
I wanted her to be somebody that I felt like I could also be like her best friend. She and I are similar in a lot of ways, but she's also, I hope people know me think this, she's a lot more chaotic than I am. She's a lot more menacing, I think. But I just want her to be somebody that like girls who often read romance novels can relate to because she's a romance novel girly. She loves New York. She loves sugar. She loves, Taylor Swift and all of these things. And it kind of just fell in from there. But I also think there's something to be said about women who other people find them unlikable, and I think a lot of people can find Rosie unlikable at times, but I think that's grounded in realism because women are expected to act perfect at times, and I definitely don't think Rosie acts near perfect, and I really wanted to explore that with her.
Yes, and it comes across so refreshingly. I mean, a character who I think what we call it is like, we call it like a Jane Doe. It's like a perfect character that has no flaws is like the publishing term for it. and those just aren't interesting.
No.
So her flaws are like amazing, and I think that she's just absolutely wonderful to like follow and root for. So revisions and the revision process. This is your first book.
Yes.
So why don't you tell us about writing it and then the journey to your book deal and revising and how that whole process played out for you.
Yeah, it was honestly like kind of a daydream on all of it. I wrote the first draft when I was still at home in Tennessee, like during the pandemic, because I was just so super bored and I had nothing to do. And it's very different to write a book like, with no deadline than now I'm writing a book with a deadline. It's very different. And I was just kind of like, well, I'll write however I want to write, and I have whatever timeline I have. And so it took me about a year to finish the first draft, and then I moved to New York and I filled in all, the better parts of New York that aren't fake, that I fictionalized. And then I reached out to my agent. I think I got her in like 4 months, and we did another year of revisions, and then we sold the book, and then it's just been on from there. Yeah.
So you and this book have been through
We've
many
been through
years together.
Yeah, a lot. That's my baby. Yeah.
Which and it's funny because authors will talk, especially traditionally published like we are, will talk about how long of a timeline it is to get a book published. And typically from that it's like a year and a half. But this is even longer.
Yeah, this was a long process.
Yeah, because of, like you said, COVID. So I think that the product of your book is absolutely
Thank you.
Okay, so now let's talk about Aiden, our
Okay.
little peacoat wearing literary boy.
Yeah.
Okay, so because so many aspects of his personality were written as a foil or in opposition to Rosie's, we know some things like right off the bat. We know that he's got the dark and broody going on. So I want to hear a little bit about that, but then also he's so three-dimensional, and he's not just that one thing. So can you kind of talk about what, archetypes of his character you chose to include, and then also how you added that extra layer of depth to him that was beyond the caricature?
I was honestly thinking, what if one of these men in my workshops were actually nice? If, one of the people that, continually critique me, what if they were hotter than they are? And what if they were a lot nicer than they are? And so I kind of drew, at the beginning, he really does suck. He says the absolute worst things that have been taken from some of my actual classes and stuff.
Oh, no.
And then I was like, what if I just make him, nicer and hotter, and, he has that capability of understanding,
Yeah, okay, got it. So, yeah, he has such an interesting, family background that, informs so much of, the way that he, sort of the prejudices that he comes into it with.
Yeah, I guess that's also a signal for me not to be so judgmental to those people. Okay, they can have a past, they can have a family too,
Well, yeah, but to your point with Rosie and her, very real flaws, it's we all make those snap judgments about people. So.
Yeah.
Okay, absolutely love it. So, the theme, you were just kind of touching on this sort of theme of acceptance and mutual understanding. I feel like that's sort of the big one that we get here. Is this something that you ever got to experience with a real critique partner in real life, or is it more I'm envisioning a dream scenario here?
This was totally a dream scenario. I don't think any man that I was in a workshop class with who had Penguin Classic under his arm was ever what if I tried out Emily Henry? What if I read The Love Hypothesis? And I was I did read the classic, so there's an understanding for me, so I don't want to speak for the Ducros.
Going off of that, do you think that there should be more, feminine leading literature in high school and college curriculums?
Oh my gosh, yes, because I think you're forced to read Dickens and blah blah blah, but what if you read the Brontes, who have romance novels, or Jane Austen, who I think is the mother of romance novels.
Yeah, especially in co-ed schools, which I sadly didn't have experience with. So I actually did get to read a lot, but I know that I was kind of in the minority there.
Totally.
Okay, so I did want to leave a space for you to mention any other themes or metaphors that you were trying to weave in.
I guess one of the things that I really did want to touch on is her Peruvian culture, because I feel so much of my life I read or participated in media that was Latinx that wasn't Peruvian, and it would always frustrate me because I am half Peruvian, and I really, really wanted to show that culture as much as I could in this book through the different food, which is amazing, or their different traditions and such.
Yeah, so I did let's jump ahead to that question. Okay, so I was gonna ask what did you decide to include versus things that you were I guess things that you were like, I want to share this with Rosie, because like you said, you share that culture with her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The number one thing that I had no choice to include, because my mother is like the best mom in the world, but I had no choice, was the food. Because my mom is always on about how Peruvian food is the number one food, and she's right. You can ask her, and she'll tell you all about it. So I really wanted to include Peruvian food in it because it is delicious. And there's like the Christmas Eve tradition that I really wanted to include too and stuff. I think most of it could fit in the book, and I could give it to Rosie. I wanted to give it to her.
Yeah, and there's also like some, I guess, is it bilingualism or when you kind of like talk in two languages at once?
Yeah, like a Spanglish kind of thing that she had going on.
Yeah, which was just like, it felt so rooted, and I think it was really amazing. Okay, so Christina Lauren.
Yes.
She is, to level set with everybody who hasn't heard, is basically like, I would call like a hero of the romance genre. And this is actually two people. So Christina and Lauren write under a pen name, Christina Lauren. Not only is this author name dropped in the book, but if you look closely, Christina Lauren is the front cover blurber of this book. So tell us the story there. What did how did you ask them for
My parents are gonna hate this story. So there are these things in New York, like influencer events, and I always get invited, and I live with my sister, so I'm always like, can I bring a +1? And these things are open bar. And I'm not there to make friends, blah, blah, blah. I'm there to drink. And so my sister and I went, and it was their like launch event for their newest book, and we were crunk. Like, we were like the margaritas, they were frozen margaritas, they were flowing. And so we were just in the corner by ourselves. And I was wearing these like cute little red shoes, and Lauren comes up to me out of nowhere, like a jump scare, and she's like, I love your shoes. And I'm drunk, and I'm like, and I don't say anything, and I'm just like, oh my god. And then she's like, I love your shoes, like I love your outfit, and I'm like, I love you, like isn't that so funny? And so I'm trying to like keep a coherent conversation with her, and then my sister, my hero, is like, she wrote a book, and you're in the book, by the way. And Lauren was like, oh my god, like, you know what would make that book even better if my name was on the front. And I was like, oh, you're joking. And she was like, no, I would love to. And she was like, here's my email, send me your book, blah, blah, blah. She made me like say it back to her like 10 times because I was drunk. And then she was like, okay, I'm writing this down. And so yeah, then I emailed her, I sent her the book, and she so lovingly wrote the sweetest blurb ever, changed my life. Love it.
It's just the coolest thing.
Yeah, it was so crazy, so surreal.
Okay, awesome. So, one thing that we authors love to talk about is interstitials, which is just a fancy word for things that aren't a chapter. So, like a series of text messages, or a Reddit thread, or an email. And one thing that you have done here that is so unique, I have literally never seen it before, is manuscript excerpts.
Yes.
Okay, so can you explain for anyone who hasn't read the book what they can expect from these excerpts and like what's going on with their doppelgangers?
Right, so Rosie and Aiden are obviously writing this book, and they're obviously writing about each other. So between each chapter, there are little excerpts of the book that they are writing. And sometimes they're very nice things that they say about each other, but sometimes they're very like heavy insults that they write about each other. And so I just wanted to give the reader a little glimpse into what they're both experiencing.
Yes, and it's literally so fun. So their doppelgangers' names are Hunter and Maxine. And they immediately pick up on the fact that they are writing, to and about each other through this like Google Doc co-sharing situation. And you can't help but wonder like how much of it is a self-insert for them. And so, actually, let's pause there. How much of it is a self-insert for them?
All of it. Like there's one certain scene where you're gonna see that it's obviously like a self-insert because Rosie accidentally types the wrong name at the literal worst time. And so all of it is just them like kind of venting their feelings, and at first not in the best way. Like they're kind of being really mean to each other, but then in kind of like a diary form, I would say.
Yeah, okay, so then my follow-up is how much of it is a self-insert for you?
I think it's impossible for me to say, like, I am not part of this book, like, half Peruvian, half American, from Tennessee, like, loves romance novels, okay, like, we all can read between the lines. But I would say that like every writer also puts so much of themselves into their book, so I think it would be impossible for me to write a book that doesn't have myself into it. But none of this has happened to me, I swear. Like I did not go written a book with some man, I promise.
Okay. And it's like such an inception. I don't know.
Yeah, it's very meta, yeah.
So we bonded before about both of us being from Tennessee,
Yes.
and I know that when you've read my books, like there's like some call outs, and you're like, oh my god,
Yeah.
you mentioned that one thing. So and not in my book, you lovingly call out honeybee coffee.
Yes, yeah.
And I kind of want to know what our Rosie. I mean, I think most of us, you know, are pretty familiar with Knoxville here.
Right.
What are like Rosie and Aiden's favorite spots around town?
Around Knoxville?
Yeah.
Union Ave Books is number one,
Yeah.
of course. I have to be honest, the Knoxville I knew is very different from the Knoxville I know now, because before I never really hung out around downtown. I would always kind of hang out where my school was and like, you know, like where the chain restaurants were, but I would say they really like to hang out in the old city. I think that they both really love to frequent like parks and stuff. I think Sequoia Hills Park, I think they love to take walks there and stuff.
Yeah.
I'd say, yeah, Market Square, of course, a classic. I feel like Rosie, when she was younger, would definitely pretend she was in Times Square, and everybody would be like, shut up, this is Market Square.
Oh, that is really
That
nice.
way it's a self-insert.
Okay, so drafting, you're doing it now.
Yeah, horrific.
For your writing process, like how do you go about organization when you're drafting? How much do you know? How much do you just like make up on the fly? What's your writing process like?
I live by Anne Lamott, who's a very famous writer who writes a lot about writing, coined this term called the shitty first draft, and I live by that. It's very much like you just put it out on the page and whatever happens, happens. So that's what I'm doing right now, so it's really shitty, like the draft I'm writing right now. I don't really know much, I think I know like the biggest plot points, but I think that first draft I spend a lot of time like figuring out who they are as individuals and like what their dynamic is and how their dynamic changes.
Yeah.
And then I go in and like rewrite the whole thing.
Yeah, so I'm totally with you.
Yeah.
I don't know anyone who can do it differently.
No, yeah,
I'm glad
it's
we're on the
so
same
hard.
team. If you had given a different answer, I'd have been like, I respect your
She's right.
process.
Yeah.
I'm different than you, but no, we're the same.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. What was your very favorite part of this book to write?
Mom and Dad, don't listen. I loved writing the spicy seeds, of course. They're my favorite. I'm a girl. Like, they were my favorite to read, favorite to write. I loved writing those, but Mom and Dad, you can listen again. I loved writing their banter. Like, I love good banter and, like, good back and forth. So, in the very beginning, when they're constantly fighting with each other, I would love to write that. Like, I wish I could write, like, another Enemies to Lovers just to do that all over again.
Well, you should. No one's
Maybe.
stopping
Stay
you. Nobody is stopping you. The banter is absolutely bantering.
Thank you.
It's literally absolutely great dialogue. All right, so let's move into talking about literary fiction.
Okay.
So sometimes I think we need to like break out of our genre, right? You know, everybody like has preferences, but it's also nice to occasionally get a different perspective.
Yes.
So I want to know what your recommendation is, and I know that Rosie does the same for Aiden in the book. What's a good like starter romance that you recommend for somebody who hasn't really dabbled in the genre but is interested?
I think Christina Lauren, like they really are like rom-com queens.
Agreed,
Like
yeah.
I think I would start with honestly like The Unhoneymooners from Christina Lauren. Like that's such a classic. Or honestly like The Love Hypothesis, Allie Hazelwood, like anything that's very like in your face.
Yeah,
you know
you're
what I mean?
gonna fly through it.
I think also Claire Gilmore's books, of course. Her Big Fit is amazing. I think those would be my starters. Yeah.
Oh shucks.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, and then the flip of that question, which if you have a recommendation, great. If not, it's okay. What is a good lit fic book for somebody who primarily reads romance?
I don't really read a lot of lit fic. I do read like the classics. So I do like I think East of Eden is it's probably not a good intro one, but it's really good book. Sally Rooney is like I think the queen of literary fiction. I really did love Normal People and Conversations with Friends, so I would say those.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Definitely agree there. All right. So you started as in the online space. I know you've been writing for forever, but in the online Instagram space, you started as a bookstagrammer.
Yes.
So before you were an author online, you were just a reviewer online.
Yeah.
And that's like not really the case for all authors.
Right.
So I'm wondering about what that process of transitioning to being just reviewer was like, to being like an author and reviewer online and on social media.
Yeah, I'm definitely finding my footing with that right now because I feel like a lot of people who follow me for like my recommendations and my reviews, and they kind of just started buying my book because they're very nice. And so I feel really weird now. Like I felt really weird at first, like posting about my book as if like a gotcha moment or something. It's like I coined you in, and now you're gonna buy my book. But now I'm kind of trying to figure out how to go back to posting reviews for people who just follow me for my book. It's been very interesting, but it's been very nice because I feel like that's how we connected. That's how we met. It's how I met so many like lovely authors who did write lovely blurbs for my book. So it's been fun, but it's just kind of it's rocky territory, I would say.
Yeah. I mean, I love authors who read, and I personally I can tell if you read or not.
Yeah, you totally can tell.
Like it's pretty obvious.
Yeah, it definitely
So
is.
I mean, I definitely want to be in that middle space with you. So we'll not get it together.
Mm-hmm.
So romance literature, the denigration that it gets in the publishing industry. I don't know if everyone knows this, but Katie does have experience in the publishing industry.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So I want to know about your take on this sort of the way that it's treated, and like your real life experience, the book, which as we know, you started writing this quite a while ago.
Mm-hmm.
Has it changed? Like what has that like been like working in the industry and then also writing about it?
Working in the industry was so like a delightful surprise because I was kind of ready to go in like arms up, being like whatever, like I'll say what I want about romance and y'all hear it. If I lose my job, I lose my job. That didn't know what happened, thank God, because everyone is very much like everybody sees. I think in the publishing industry that romance is like the number one earning genre. It is the number one selling like time and time again. So there's a lot of respect for it in the publishing industry.
Yeah.
But there's not a lot of respect for like with randos on the street because randos will say whatever. I still get comments on like my Bookstagram of like a random person who just kind of stumbled across it saying something completely rude about it. I do think that the narrative is changing though with book talk, thank God. But yeah, this book was definitely like showing my chip on my shoulder with this, and it was definitely my love letter to romance to kind of tell everybody like whatever, like I love it, read what you want to read, you know.
And it is such a love letter. It's so great. Dream fan cast for Rosie.
I think that it, who is the new Superman? I can't pronounce his name. Do you know what I'm talking about? David something?
There's a new Superman?
Have you not seen it?
No.
Okay.
Wait, like after? No.
No, like there's a new Superman and he's giving. No offense to my boyfriend in the audience, but there is a new Superman and he would be.
Okay, we'll all Google that later.
His name's David something.
Okay.
Rosie, I don't know. I would really want a Peruvian character.
Yeah.
Or a Peruvian actress to play
Right.
her. I only know of one. Her name is Isabel Munoz or something, I think. I don't know her name. But I don't think she captures the vibe, so I have really no idea.
Heard.
It's just so like far out of my territory and belief that it'll be a film that I'm kind of like, yeah, whatever they decide, you know?
And who knows? Maybe they do, and then they pluck a fresh face.
Yeah, like I would love that.
Out of obscurity.
Yeah.
All right, my last serious question before we get to the lightning round.
Okay.
What can we see next from you, and when, and what can you tell us about it?
Okay, so I'm writing my next book right now. It's called The Last Page. It's also a rom-com set in New York. It's about a girl who's been working at a used bookstore for a really long time, basically her whole life, and she thinks she's going to inherit it when the owner unexpectedly dies before he's able to change his will. And it's left to his estranged grandson, and they do not get along with how the store should be run, and together they have to save it. So I'm in the process of writing it, and it'll be out in spring 2026.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so follow up. Do you do like Easter eggs or cameos? Can we expect to see a
It's
little?
a bookstore. They're writers. You know, read between the
Oh,
lines.
well, what
Come on.
happened? All right, so we're gonna go into our lightning round. I've got 8 questions. for
Okay.
you. Are you ready?
Yes.
All right. Plotter or pantser?
Pantser.
How many books did you read in 2024?
Oh, I think I was at 126, I think.
Oh yeah.
In the Bookstagram community, I promise you guys that's not a lot. Like there's somebody in this audience I bet who's a Bookstagram that read like 300, and I'm like saying it shamefully by 126.
I know of at least one bookstagrammer in this audience.
Carson.
Yeah. Fake dating or enemies to lovers?
Ooh. Fake dating with enemies to lovers. Can I say that? Can I say
Sure.
both?
Anything goes.
Yeah.
Physical book or e-reader?
Physical book, big time.
What Taylor Swift song is your favorite at this moment?
Oh, I've been listening to The Black Dog a lot, which has
Great
nothing
one.
to do with my mood.
last book you read that you highly recommend?
Oh, I just finished Ali Hazelwood's new book, Deep End, and it comes out I think next month or something, I think, but it's really, really good.
I can't wait to read that. All right, you can only choose one, peacoat or glasses.
I'll say glasses.
Okay.
Yeah, change it up.
Save one genre in a fire, litfic or romance.
Girl, romance. Litfic and burn.
All right, thank you so much, Katie. We're gonna go into audience questions now. So I'm gonna give everyone 30 seconds to get your brains ready to ask a question, and then Katie, you guys can raise your hands, and then Katie is gonna choose who goes based on her preference.
Oh. That's all it is.
Anybody? I know some of you have a question.
Oh,
Yes.
Of course, the book, I felt very connected to the book. Growing up in New York, married to Peruvian, of course. There's a lot of things that I was like, wow, brought back the past and the present. My question is, I love the book. My question is, when you did the bilingual stuff and you did the stuff in Spanish, to me the dishes are somewhat worldwide and everybody knows the dishes. So my question is, and it's not really criticism, I'm just wondering why you chose not to translate the Spanish in the book. I mean, there wasn't a lot of it,
Yeah.
but when you did use Spanish, I was wondering why you didn't, like, next to it, maybe put the English in parens for people who are not married to a Peruvian.
I think a lot of the time, I've read like Spanish books with like Spanish speakers in it. I get really frustrated when it was italicized, as if like it needed to stand out, as if it wasn't part of somebody's everyday life. And I kind of wanted it to feel like it was just part of like Rosie's life or her family's life, and it wasn't something that needed to be like so completely different. But I do understand like some people do need those translations. But I think for me, I just didn't feel like it was so necessary with the things that they were saying, I guess.
Okay, thanks.
And as somebody who isn't from a Spanish background, sometimes it's fun to like Google that
Yeah.
stuff, and you get to be like, ooh, what are they talking about?
Google guess and game. Yeah. Any other questions? It's okay, but yes, Miss Amar.
So do you have any, so I'm assuming that your second book is a standalone as well.
Yes.
Do you have any plans of writing series?
My literal dream would to be like writing a mafia rom-com, but just off from the crowd. I don't know what the mafia does, is what I realized.
That's probably for the
In
best.
New York, who like have fun in with the mafia, and I was like, the mafia's so hot. Like they just shoot people because they like look love interest on it. She's like, the mafia just shoots people, and I was like, oh, so no, I don't think so. I would love to if I'm ever educated in mafia, but
Okay.
probably not ever. I think there was another hint. Yes.
Sorry, I got here a little late, but my question is your next book going to feature also Peruvian FMC, and why is it important to showcase part of your culture and your identity into your books?
Yes, I think every book I ever write will include my Peruvian culture in some way. So she'll be fully Peruvian in the next book. She won't, yet the guy will be from Tennessee in the next one. But I think it's important to me because when I grew up, I never saw it. Like every actress was from a different country, and there was no mention of Peru. And so whenever I saw it, I'd like freak out and go tell my mom. And I want it to be like more mainstream, I feel, because not a lot of people know about the culture and what a lovely culture it is. And so I want to be able to share that in more of like a mainstream way and kind of bring that representation. Because one of the best things about this book is I've had so many people DM me, be like, oh, like we drink Coca-Cola, or we have alcohols, or we do this like on Christmas Eve or whatever. And it's just been really heartwarming for me, and I want to continue to bring that to other people. So, any other questions? Miss Miss
Call me whatever you
Lentz,
want.
excuse me.
Call me whatever you want. So what was one piece of feedback that you got from your editor that you were really against, but it ended up changing part of the trajectory, or maybe changing a scene that you weren't expecting, but now you're really glad that it's in the book?
The whole, well, not to spoil it, but romance novels do have this. Like, the whole third act breakup was completely different than what I had originally written. It was really messy. It was like they had finished the book and, like, I don't know, he went behind her back to publish it or something like crazy like that, and she was like, that's a little too far. And so originally, the original one, like, she didn't go back to Tennessee or anything like that. So the third act breakup was completely different, and she was right. Like, co-star, like, she totally knew what she was doing. Yeah. Anybody else? Okay, thank you all so much for coming. This was so sweet.